Sister refused help during my struggles when I was dead broke. Now I'm rich and she's on her knees begging for her kids' treatment. Be me, 24, living in Phoenix. Have a sister who's 30. We've never been close. Like ever? Growing up, we were complete opposites. She was the overachiever type, captain of 3 different sports teams, teacher's pet in every class, every parent's dream child. Meanwhile, I was the problem child, getting constant talks from our parents about how I need to apply myself more, about how I should be more like my sister. Even as adults, we're still worlds apart. She's all about strict schedules and perfect planning, while I'm just going with the flow, trying to figure life out day by day. Things were manageable, though, until about 18 months ago, when my whole life turned upside down. Working as a marketing specialist at this up-and-coming company, things seemed stable until they weren't. Company shut down without any warning. No severance. No nothing. One day I'm at my desk planning next month's expenses. Next day, my manager comes in looking like death. Bad news written all over his face. Sorry, but we're closing immediately. You'll get your final check in 2 weeks. Just like that. Everything I'd built came crashing down. No backup plan. No savings. Just a stack of bills piling up. And rent breathing down my neck. The walls were literally closing in. Couldn't sleep for days. Brain running constant panic mode. Tried everything I could think of. Called every temp agency in the city. Reached out to old coworkers. Even considered selling my laptop, which I needed for job hunting. Nothing was working out. 2 weeks till rent was due. Running out of options fast. That's when I realized, had to do the one thing I really didn't want to. Ask my sister for help. Let me explain about my sister. She's not exactly mean, but she's rigid as hell. Everything in her life is black and white. Right and wrong. Her way or the highway. Been like this since we were kids. If I didn't do things exactly her way, whether it was cleaning our shared room or picking classes in high school, she'd completely lose it. So asking her for help felt like swallowing broken glass, but I had no choice. Couldn't ask our parents either. Dad's on disability. Mom's still paying off their mortgage. If I asked them, they'd probably dip into retirement savings. That was the last thing I wanted. Probably why they've been pushing me to figure things out on my own, instead of helping directly. So there I was, staring at my phone for hours, sitting on my beaten-up couch. Pride screaming at me not to call, but fear of homelessness screaming louder. Finally did it. Called her. She answered like I was interrupting something important. Tried to keep it together. But as soon as I started explaining, lost it completely. Full-on ugly crying, told her everything. About losing my job. About being scared. Just needed $1,000 for rent. Until I could figure things out. Her response? Just no. Flat and cold. No hesitation. Then she started lecturing me about how she doesn't believe in lending money to family because it always ruins relationships. Said it wasn't personal, just her policy. Like she was some kind of bank manager. Rejecting a loan application. Couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tried to reason with her. Explained I wasn't asking for a handout, just a loan. But she cut me off cold. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Then hung up. Just like that, sat there in complete shock. Phone still in my hand, knew we weren't close. But this was next level cold. Didn't even offer to help another way. No, let me talk to my husband. No, maybe I can help with groceries. No, I'll help you job hunt. Nothing. Like slamming a door in my face, leaving me standing in the rain. Couldn't stop crying that night. Wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about her not giving a single shit. About her sobbing sister. Kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I'd said something wrong. If I'd somehow offended her. But the truth hit harder than a brick. She just didn't care. That realization hurt worse than losing my job. She was my sister, my blood. And in my moment of need, she turned her back on me. Never expected her to be that cold. Was a complete mess after that. The weight of her no wasn't just about money. It was like being smacked in the face with the reality of our relationship, or lack of one. Who does that to their own sister? Wasn't some distant cousin she barely knew. Was her literal sister. Wasn't asking for a shopping spree. Was asking for a lifeline? But there was no time for self-pity. Rent wasn't going to pay itself. Couldn't afford to lose my apartment. Woke up next morning, eyes puffy from crying. Massive headache pounding away. Told myself, if she won't help, screw it. Would figure this out on my own. First thing I did was make a list. Everything I could possibly sell. Was depressing how little I had worth anything. Started with my old gaming setup. Decent pair of noise-canceling headphones. Anything extra I could find? Put it all online. Sold most of it within a day. Almost pawned my laptop too. But needed it for job hunting. Every sale felt like giving up a piece of dignity. What choice did I have though? Wasn't just the selling part that hurt. Was the reminder of how precarious everything was. While packing up my console, kept thinking about my sister's perfect life. her fancy house in the nice part of town, her weekly yoga classes, her husband's shiny new SUV. She had everything. Meanwhile, I'm counting pennies, just to keep a roof over my head. Life isn't fair. That lesson hit hard. Decided to swallow my pride again. Reached out to some friends. That was even harder than calling sister, because borrowing from friends, that's a special kind of awkward. But you know what? They actually came through. Not with huge amounts, but enough to keep landlord off my back. For another couple weeks, one friend even offered their couch. If things got really bad, that gesture alone made me cry. Still didn't want to be a burden. Started applying for literally every job. Temp work, retail, even stuff completely outside my field. Didn't care about titles anymore or salaries. Just needed something. Anything to keep me afloat. For weeks, it was the same cycle. Wake up, send resumes, check job boards, attend interviews, get those same canned rejections. Soul-crushing doesn't even begin to describe it, but kept pushing forward. Meanwhile, sister didn't check in. Not once. No, how are you holding up? No, did you figure something out? Just complete radio silence. And honestly, that hurt even more. Wasn't expecting her to change her mind. But a text to see if I was okay. Would that have killed her? One moment really sticks in my memory. Was taking out trash one evening. Bumped into my neighbor. Sweet older lady from 2 doors down. Could tell something was off with me. Must have looked as stressed as I felt. She stopped me right there. You've got a lot on your shoulders, don't you? Before I knew it, was spilling my guts to her. Tears and everything. She didn't offer money, but she listened. First time someone actually seemed to care. Managed to scrape by that month. But barely. Kept selling whatever I could find. Started picking up random gigs. Walking dogs. Building IKEA furniture for people. Anything to make a buck. Wasn't glamorous, but kept me in my apartment. That's all that mattered. Looking back at those weeks, some of the hardest in my life, but learned something important. When push comes to shove, I can survive on my own. Thing is, though, survival came at a cost. Trust in my sister, completely gone. Before all this, had this naive hope that despite our differences, we'd always be there for each other in the big moments. But that phone call shattered everything. It wasn't just about money. It was what it represented. Her refusal wasn't just about rent. It was refusing to stand by me when I needed her most. For weeks, kept replaying that conversation, trying to make sense of it. Wondered if I caught her on a bad day. Maybe she had her own problems I didn't know about, but then would remember how cold she sounded, how quick she was to shut me down, and I'd get angry all over again. It was like a cycle, hurt and frustration. Couldn't escape it. The silence from her side made it worse. Even if she wouldn't lend money, she could have checked in. A simple, "Hey, how's everything going?" would have meant the world. But no, too busy with her perfect life to spare a thought for her struggling sister. More I thought about it, more resentful I became. Didn't tell anyone else in the family. Part of me didn't want the drama. Other part felt embarrassed. What would they even say? That I should have planned better? That I should have expected this from her? Easier to keep it to myself. Focus on moving forward. And I did move forward. 2 years later, life looks completely different. After grinding at temp jobs, finally landed something stable. Decent salary too. Nothing fancy, but pays the bills. Gives me room to breathe. Most importantly, helped me rebuild my life. Barely heard from sister during that time. Honestly preferred it that way. Not like we had weekly catch-ups before. After what happened, even the thought of talking to her felt like reopening a wound. Knew I should have been over it by then, but the resentment lingered. How do you forget something like that? Sure, I was doing better now, but couldn't erase the fact when I needed her most, she slammed the door in my face. So imagine my surprise when my phone lights up one evening, her name on the screen. First thought it was a mistake. She never calls, ever. First instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won. Moment I said hello, knew something was wrong. She was crying. Not the delicate movie kind, full-on sobbing. Took her a minute to form words. When she did, couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her husband lost his job months ago. They were struggling. On top of that, her 3-year-old daughter, my niece, needed some medical treatment. Insurance wouldn't cover up front. They needed $1,500. And she was asking me for help? Sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I just heard. This was the same sister who turned me away when I needed $1,000 to avoid losing my apartment, the same one who lectured me about not lending money to family. And now she's asking me to bail her out. She must have sensed my hesitation. Quickly launched into this speech about how dire the situation was. It's for my daughter, she said, voice breaking. She's just a baby. We don't have anyone else to turn to, begging me through the phone. Please, I'll pay you back. As soon as we get reimbursed, I swear. Here's the thing though, I love my niece. She's adorable, sweet, completely innocent in all of this. But as much as I care about her, couldn't ignore the irony. 2 years ago, I was the one on that other end, desperate and scared, and she shut me down. Without a second thought, now here she was, expecting me to swoop in. Save the day? Took a deep breath. Said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Only silence on the other end. Could almost hear her taking a breath, gearing up for what was coming. Then like a switch had been flipped, she exploded. "How could you do this?" she screamed. "This isn't about me. This is about my daughter, your niece. How can you punish an innocent child just to get back at me? What kind of person does that?" Had to hold phone away from ear, completely stunned. "You're petty, vindictive, selfish. That's what you are. Selfish. Calm down," I said. "You're not being fair right now. I'm not punishing anyone, least of all my niece, but I'm not going to hand over money when you haven't even been honest with me." "Honest with you?" she snapped. "What the hell does that even mean? You think I'm lying about my daughter's health now? God, you've really sunk low." "I didn't say that," I said. "But you weren't upfront about the money. You said it was all for medical bills. But I found out a big chunk is for other expenses. That's not okay, and you know it." She didn't even acknowledge what I said, instead doubled down harder. "You have no idea what it's like to be in my position. My husband's out of work. We're drowning in bills. I'm doing everything I can to keep this family afloat. But you're just sitting there, on your high horse, judging me like you're so much better." Told her straight up, "This isn't about me being better or worse. This is about boundaries. 2 years ago, I was in a terrible spot. I came to you for help, and you said no. Fine, that was your choice. But now you're in a similar situation, and you expect me to just forget all that and bail you out. Do you see how unfair that is? Don't you dare compare this to what happened 2 years ago." She was practically shouting now. "You needed money for rent. That's not the same as needing money. For my child's health? You're a grown adult. You could have figured it out on your own." "And I did," I shot back. "I figured it out on my own because I had no other choice. And guess what? You have other choices too. Sell some stuff, borrow smaller amounts from other people, figure out a payment plan. But don't act like I'm the bad guy for not swooping in to fix everything." "Oh, so now you're going to lecture me?" Her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's rich coming from someone who's always been a screw-up. You're just jealous that I've done better for myself, and now you're using this as some sick way to get back at me." "Jealous of you?" I repeated. Couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You think this is about jealousy?" "No, babe. This is about you showing your true colors. You set the rules for our relationship. When you refuse to help me, I'm just playing by those same rules now. If you don't like it, maybe you should have thought about that." She came back with one last jab. "You're heartless. Completely heartless. I hope you can live with yourself, knowing you're letting your niece suffer because of your stupid grudge." She scoffed loudly, then hung up. Sat there for a moment, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part felt oddly relieved. For the first time ever, I'd stood my ground against her. Even though it was messy, even though it was painful, knew it was the right thing to do. But here's the thing. I wasn't being petty. Wasn't even trying to get revenge. Was just holding her to her own standard. She made it clear years ago. We weren't the kind of family that helped each other out. She set those rules. Now she's mad that I'm following them. That conversation blew up everything. Within hours, my mom was calling, demanding to know what happened. Sister had gone straight to our parents, painting me as some heartless monster. Who was letting my niece suffer out of spite? Mom begged me to reconsider. It's not about your sister. It's about your niece. Even my dad called. He usually stays out of our drama. Said he was disappointed in me. It was overwhelming. Felt like everyone was ganging up, like no one cared about my side. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew. Standing my ground was right. If I gave in now, what message would that send? That she could treat me however she wanted. And I'd still come running. When she needed me? No thanks. Still wasn't an easy decision. Kept thinking about my niece. None of this was her fault. Part of me wanted to help. But every time I considered it, would hear my sister's words from 2 years ago, echoing in my head. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Over the next few days, family tension got worse. Parents kept calling, trying to guilt trip me. Sister sent angry texts, accusing me of being cruel and ungrateful. At one point, she tried to loop in extended family, get them to gang up on me. Thankfully, they stayed out. Meanwhile, something felt off. Couldn't shake this feeling. There was more to the story than she was letting on. Did some digging. Reached out to mutual friend, one closer to my sister. Asked what they knew. That's when truth came out. Turns out niece's medical situation wasn't as dire as sister claimed. Treatment was more nice to have than life or death. And that $1,500 wasn't just for medical bills. She was planning to use it for overdue bills and other expenses. Asked friend if sister mentioned any serious medical issues or something urgent with niece. Friend seemed genuinely confused. Said sister hadn't mentioned any medical problems at all. Last they heard from her, just usual complaints about money being tight and stress from husband's unemployment. No indication of anything urgent or life-threatening. This just confirmed my suspicions. Story wasn't adding up. When I heard that, any lingering guilt disappeared. Wasn't just that she'd asked for help, she'd straight up lied. Used her own child to manipulate me, to tug at my heartstrings. That was something I could never forgive. So yeah, tables had turned, but I wasn't about to play by her twisted rules. If she wanted to fix her problems, she'd have to do it without me. But family wasn't letting this go. First, there were my parents. Mom called at least 3 times a day, each time with different angle, to guilt trip me. One rant was about turning my back on family. Another focused entirely on my niece. You might not care about your sister, she said during one call. But what about that sweet little girl? What has she ever done to you? Dad, who normally avoided drama, called once to tell me I was being cold and selfish. Hard to hear that, even though they didn't have full story. Tried explaining my side. Told mom exactly what sister said. 2 years ago when I needed help, reminded her how I scraped by on my own without turning to family for more than emotional support. But mom wasn't having it. That was different, she said. You didn't have a child to think about. Didn't seem to matter to her. That I'd been just as desperate, just as scared. To her, only thing that mattered was that my niece needed help, and I wasn't giving it. Then came the text from sister. She was blowing up my phone, paragraph after paragraph, of accusations and insults. One message would be begging to reconsider. Next would be calling me names. The whiplash was real. My favorite text, if you can even call it that, was this 6-part rant about how I was lucky to be in a position to help and how I didn't understand what it was like to struggle. That one nearly made me throw my phone across the room. Really wanted to reply, "Oh, I don't know what it's like to struggle? Did you forget about 2 years ago when I was crying to you about losing my apartment?" But I didn't. Knew it wouldn't get through to her. Honestly didn't want to waste the energy. At one point she tried to drag extended family into mess. Woke up one morning to flurry of texts from cousins, aunts, even couple family friends, all saying same thing. How could you let your niece suffer? Most didn't even know full story. They just heard her version, which made me sound like the villain of the century. Ended up muting half of them, just to get break from notifications. What really pushed me over edge, though, was when sister decided to involve our parents even more. She showed up at their house one afternoon with my niece in tow, using her as prop in this twisted guilt campaign. Mom called me later that day. "Your niece was here today," she said, like I didn't know where this was going. She doesn't understand why her auntie won't help her mommy. Wanted to scream. It wasn't my niece's fault. I knew that. But fact that sister was willing to use her own child as weapon in this fight made my blood boil. It was manipulative, plain and simple, only made me more determined to stand my ground. Still, guilt wasn't easy to shake. Every time I thought about my niece, felt this ache in my chest. She was just a kid, completely innocent. In all of this, she didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of our family drama. Eventually decided, needed to take control of narrative. Couldn't keep letting sister twist story to make me look bad. We have this big family group chat where we act nice, throw fake compliments. You know the type. Here's what I wrote in group chat. "Hi everyone. Want to clear the air about what's been going on? Because there's been some misunderstanding. 2 years ago, I was in a tough spot. Reached out to my sister for help. Was about to lose my apartment. Asked to borrow $1,000. She said no, which was her choice. I respected that. Even though it hurt. Well, now my sister asked me for $1,500. At first thought it was for my niece's medical bills, but found out later that wasn't whole truth. Large portion of money was for other expenses. Not sharing this to shame anyone, just want to explain Why I made the decision I did. I don't believe in being manipulated. Don't think it's fair? To twist story to make me look like villain. I love my niece. Would never want her to suffer. But this situation isn't as black and white as it's been made out to be. I'm happy to help directly with my niece's medical bills, if that's truly needed, but won't hand over cash. Without transparency. Hope you can all understand where I'm coming from. Sent it. Immediately muted chat. Couldn't handle anxiety of waiting for replies. Went for walk to clear head. When got back, over 50 messages waiting. Most from my sister, who had clearly lost it. Didn't want to accuse her of lying to everyone outright, but needed to show parents truth. They wouldn't believe me. If I just accused her of lying, they'd need proof. Next day made a decision. Called the hospital. Asked about payment options. For treatment sister claimed was urgent. They were polite but firm. No record of any patient with your niece's name. Registered for treatment. So gathered everything to forward to my parents. Only way to make them see. Sister had fabricated entire situation. Mom sounded relieved, but Dad was livid. Why didn't she tell us any of this? He asked. I didn't have an answer. Sister's actions made no sense. Was it pride? Desperation? Or was she just so used to manipulating people that she didn't know how to be honest anymore? After weeks of drama, lies, and family turmoil, I was done. Done with constant back and forth. Done with being guilt-tripped. Done with letting sister's manipulations control my life. Time to take charge. Set boundaries, not just with her, but with entire family. Reached out to parents again. Knew they were stuck in middle, trying to mediate, keep the peace. But their constant pressure to fix things was draining me. Called them separately to make my stance clear. When spoke to Mom, told her straight up, I love you. But this situation with sister is toxic. I've explained my side. Done more than enough to offer help directly for niece. But now we know she lied. About medical bills? I can't get involved anymore. Need you to respect my decision. Stop pushing me to change my mind. She sighed heavily. Thought she might argue, but she surprised me. I understand, honey, she said quietly. I just hate seeing family like this. I do too, I admitted. But this isn't on me. Sister created this situation. When she lied to everyone, she needs to own up to her actions. I can't fix this for her. Won't be dragged into it anymore. Dad was harder to convince. Family is family, he said. You don't turn your back on them. No matter what? Dad, I replied. I didn't turn my back on her. She turned her back on all of us. When she lied and manipulated to make herself look like victim, you saw the proof from hospital. There was no treatment scheduled. For my niece, she made it all up. Now she's trying to guilt me into cleaning up her mess. That's not what family is supposed to do. He didn't say much after that. Could tell he was mulling it over. Knew he wouldn't fully agree, but at least I'd said my piece. Made decision to block sister's number. Felt extreme. But every interaction with her had been toxic. Needed space to heal before blocking her. Sent one last message. I love my niece. I'll always be here for her. If she truly needs me, but I can't continue this back and forth. It's unhealthy for both of us. Hope one day we can rebuild our relationship, but for now I need space. Please respect that. She didn't reply. Before I blocked her, honestly didn't expect her to. Knew this wouldn't be end of her attempts to stir up drama. But at least I'd taken step toward protecting my peace. With those boundaries in place, finally felt like I could breathe. For first time in weeks, had moment to reflect on everything that happened. The anger, the hurt, constant questioning. Whether I'd done right thing, it had all taken toll on me. Still couldn't shake guilt about niece. She was only person in this mess who truly didn't deserve any of it. Decided to send her care package. Nothing too extravagant. Few toys and books, ones I knew she'd love. Included handwritten note. I love you so much, and I'm always here for you. Hope you enjoy these gifts. Love, Auntie. Sent it through parents. To avoid direct contact with sister, they promised to pass it along. As weeks turned to months, heard less and less about sister. Parents stopped bringing her up. Group chat quieted down. Didn't know if she'd moved on, or just plotting next move. But either way, didn't care anymore. Done letting her take up space. In my head, one unexpected silver lining though. Support from some cousins. After my message in group chat, few of them reached out privately. Said they admired how I handled everything. One cousin even said, always felt sister acted entitled. but no one ever called her out. Good for you for standing ground. Hearing that meant more than I can say. Reminded me I wasn't alone, even if it sometimes felt that way. Eventually reached point. Where could think about sister without feeling knot of anger in my stomach? Still didn't trust her. Doubted I ever would, but didn't feel consumed by situation anymore. Found peace, not because situation was resolved, but because I'd made choice to prioritize my own well-being. As for my sister, who knows what future holds? Maybe one day we'll find a way to rebuild our relationship, but for now, I'm okay keeping my distance. Life is too short to spend it tangled up in someone else's toxicity. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, peace is priceless. Not willing to sacrifice it for anyone, not even family. MFW, I finally stood up for myself. TFW, family drama finally settles. TFW, finding inner peace matters more than keeping toxic relationships. Thanks for reading Anons. That's my story.